Hello everybody, I'm back with another video for you today. And I know by now you've probably all experienced a great deal of hype and praise surrounding this early access Viking themed survival game, VALHEIM. But I'm still going to give my opinion on it. So let's just jump into that. I'm not going to mess around, I'm going to give you pros and cons, everything that I think about this game, all the thoughts. It's going to be pretty thorough. So let's get right into it. Here are my brutally honest thoughts on VALHEIM. I've played my fair share of early access survival games. Rust, Subnautica, The Forest, to name but a few. And I often find survival games pretty tedious, a little bit repetitive. The core mechanics get a bit boring for me, and I tend to get carried along just by, having some friends there to play it with me. I don't think VALHEIM is particularly any different, but it actually does a lot of the survival genre stuff really well. VALHEIM definitely has a few things mechanically that set it apart from a lot of other survival games. A big one is the stamina bar, which you can see at the bottom of the screen there. It's going to restrict you from doing pretty much everything, whether that be running, in combat, throwing punches or hitting with your weapon, even swimming and building and farming, like whatever you can think of, it's going to be restricted in some way by the stamina. And that can be a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing. So stamina's pretty nice for combat. It's like Dark Souls in the sense that it's quite punishing, feels good to, get a dodge in or a parry and use your stamina wisely. I've been in some of the hard biomes and really have to pick your fights carefully, otherwise you can be in trouble. And it's quite nice in terms of progression, because it does make your character feel quite a bit more nimble and agile as you progress through the game. But it can also be pretty awful if you get stuck in a hole without any stamina and you can't jump out and it takes 5 minutes to recoup your stamina so you can escape, or if you freaking fall into a river and your mighty Viking warrior can't even bloody get his head above water because he's too tired. There are some pretty terrible aspects to the system. I mean, also when you're running from one point to another, especially early on in the game, traversing the world is very difficult with a low stamina bar, and it is quite difficult to gain more of that resource until later on, until you eat certain foods and stuff like that. And yeah, it can just be a bit of a frustration, I think, when you're running at a snail's pace, jogging along, and having to wait for your bar at the bottom to come back to help you out. So there are some pretty big downsides to this unique mechanic, which is a shame, but I do like what it does for combat, so that's something. Next, we have to talk about the skills in this game. So similarly to Skyrim, the more you do a certain task or use a certain weapon, the more proficient you become in it. It becomes easier to chop wood or to mine things with your pickaxe, basically. And when you die, some of these skills reset a little bit. So you actually have a pretty big punishment if you do fall in combat. Makes death quite scary and quite tense, and the combat's already pretty difficult. We'll get on to talking a bit more about that in a sec. But it does add a lot of tension, this idea that your progression can be set back quite a bit when you die. You of course also lose your loot, so whatever's on you, your corpse will hold that stuff and keep it there for the future. You can go and pick it back up, but you cannot regain these skills that you lose unless you of course just spend more time re-leveling up. So quite a, punishing death mechanic there. But I quite liked it, because it made pretty much every situation where the threat of death is present a lot more stressful, a lot more fun, a lot more tense. This game has been bloody stressful, and I don't usually get stressed out playing games. Like, I'm quite chill, quite relaxed, but yeah, VALHEIM knew how to get to me there. Let's talk a little bit more about the death in VALHEIM. VALHEIM is pretty much the unironic Dark Souls of the survival game genre, I feel like. It makes vanilla Minecraft look even more like a game for 9-year-olds than I thought it was possible. You know, if you want to play Valheim with friends who are not, you know, big gamers, haven't played many challenging games, then you're going to have to prepare them for the possibility of being brutalized over and over again, because there are some really challenging enemies that the game throws in your direction. Whenever you start a new game, your character starts off as a real weakling. Like, you can only take a couple of hits before you're dead, and then you're going to have to run, you know, naked and with fists to go and grab your items. And this feeling kind of persists throughout the game and even heightens at points when the potential of losing all of your valuable equipment, it's just gut-wrenching if you die out in the mountains, for example, or, you know, at sea, where it's very difficult to find your corpse and get your loot. And that can honestly be pretty demoralizing. Like, if you struggle to get your stuff back, then that can make you not want to really play anymore. But luckily it's pretty easy to get your stuff back, and you can be quite careful when it comes to retrieving your loot. I've also got to mention that the loot stays on the ground for a crazy amount of time. I don't think it's this way in other survival games. Like, your body and your corpse, all your items will be there for so long after you die. Same with even random enemies that die. Like, you kill a guy and then his corpse is just lying on the ground forever. Like, you can go and pick it up whenever. So that really impressed me. It meant there was definitely not that much risk of losing all of your stuff if you die, and also it just added to the feeling of permanence, you know, that everything in the world has, which added to the immersion. Overall, I think the really important point here is the game makes you feel a real attachment to your character and a proper sense of dread and fear when you're encountering new enemies or locations or situations, and that's something that very few games or even survival games actually manage to achieve, especially for, you know, people like myself who've played quite a lot of those games already. Boss fights are also a thing in Valheim, because why not? It's pretty cool. I'll throw some boss fight footage up there for you, why not? You're welcome. Took me quite some effort, I'm sure. But I'm going to be honest, guys. I feel like the boss fights as they currently exist could be quite a bit better. There's definitely a lot of diversity to the theme, to the characteristics, you know, to the fight patterns of all the bosses, and, you know, it's very, very cool how they look, like, aesthetically, as you can see here. Even the first boss is just amazing. I can still recall the amount of sheer hype that I was feeling when me and my party of friends were coming up to the second boss, and I was, you know, thinking, what the hell are we going to be up against? This is going to be pretty epic. It actually exceeded my expectations, and that is because the difficulty jump after the first boss is insane, dude. I had no idea what was coming. Like, this felt like playing super hard mode Dark Souls without any freaking arms. Like, I didn't even have a mouse and keyboard. Like, we got slammed so hard. Now, I think part of this is the sheer tankiness of these bosses. Like, they're so tough after the first boss. It feels like they're definitely, pushing you towards getting the highest level gear that you can possibly get at that stage in order to make the fight easier. And honestly, I'm a little bit upset that it's like that. It'd be cool if you could kind of outskill the bosses and really, even with low level gear, just actually wreck them by dodging or parrying or like doing stuff like that. But I found it was just so inefficient to use a melee weapon against them. Maybe I'm doing something wrong there. But the way seemed to be just shoot them with bows and arrows for ages. I would have loved a bit of nuance in the boss fights, because they felt a bit, you just have to grind out the loot and the gear, and once you have that, you just grind the boss down, whittle its health down slowly. And if you don't have the required stuff, like, I didn't have the right equipment and shit for the second boss, and it took like several hours to actually kill it, which is funny. And yeah, there's not really a huge threat of losing your character in these boss fights, because, they're quite predictable in how the bosses move, and some of them are very, not even that powerful, not even that likely to kill you. It's more just a matter of patience and whittling their health down, which I think is a little bit frustrating, and it would have been cool to have a bit more, a bit more agency, a bit more, like, shorter boss fights, more interesting, a bit more possible to outskill, I guess, the encounter than I felt like you currently have in the game. But that being said, I'm certainly glad they're a part of the game. They're very cool milestones to achieve. They help push the, the feeling of progression in the game as you unlock new things when you kill the bosses. You unlock new abilities. You unlock new parts of the map and access to dungeons and things. So I'm happy they're there. I just wish they were a little bit more rewarding to fight than they are at the moment. While we're here, I should also mention that there are dungeons, which are quite nice in this game. They definitely give you a bit of a break from the monotony of mining and chopping wood and wandering the map. Give you a bit more combat-focused gameplay, if that's what you're after, and they're, pretty good for sort of progressing more linearly, I should say, within the game. So, it gives a nice sort of ulterior style of gameplay, which I think is done really well in this game compared to other survival games where there are sort of dungeon-like things, but they're definitely not quite as exciting on the first couple of attempts, and not quite as challenging as well, I would say. Definitely had some issues with my friends when we were encountering dungeons for the first time. So I really love that aspect of the game. So I've been paying a lot of attention to combat and death and all those grisly topics. I think it's time we talk about the very important crafting and base building that's, the backbone of every survival game. So, what do I think about that? Well, overall, crafting, recipe discovery in this game are fantastically done, I think. Maybe even some of the best that I've come across in any game. For this genre, I didn't really have to look anything up at all. The game guides you quite nicely. It doesn't feel too linear at all, but it is very well structured and laid out for you. It's very much go from place A to place B to place C. You can do what you want on the way there, but it is very much sort of a linear, overarching journey. But it just worked so well and felt so natural and fluid. And I thought, it was probably the best that it's been done in any survival game I've played. And it's really all about that feeling of progression and, the recipes, the crafting, and just unlocking new stuff to do, new minerals to mine. It's all just done really smartly and executed very well and naturally. It just flows so well, makes you feel like you're progressing at every stage of the game, which I'm a big fan of. Now, I'm not sure I've been brutal enough so far in this review, so I do have one pretty big complaint, which is about the grindiness of this game and the crafting and what you're required to build. Now, I may have overdone it a little bit in the amount of sheer hoarding that I was doing of certain minerals and valuable goods, but you're definitely incentivized to, push and grind and just collect a lot of stuff, because you're going to need it for crafting certain items and armor and weapons and whatnot. I know for some people they probably enjoy taking up a second job as a survival game player, and deep down a part of me is okay with Valheim kidnapping me and forcing me to mine virtual rocks for 40 hours, but no. The real thing that drives me up the wall though is how difficult it actually is to gather the necessary resources, like to get them to your base, because you have to, make big runs back with the stamina issues that I've mentioned. You're overladen with bloody minerals way too much. You have to take off your clothes and leave them in a chest to bloody carry everything. Now, the game actually gives you portals which allow you to fast travel between areas, so that's great. But imagine my surprise when I found out, wait a sec, you can't actually take any of the useful equipment and gear through these portals? What? I mean, let me clarify. You can't take any valuable metals, the things you're mining and trying to get back to your base. You can't take any of that stuff through the portals. Unlucky, mate. You're going to have to run all the way. This is even worse when you have to sometimes go across the sea by boat to actually access the areas that require, mining, to get the resources. All in all, it's just a massive headache. Like, I wish there was an option for you to fast travel to these mines so you could mine the resources, do your mining, have your fun, get your stuff, build your loot, build your gear. It just felt like such a chore, and it felt like they intentionally, with this portal stuff, they knew it could be easy, but they definitely made it hard on purpose to add a bit of game time, to give you more of a grind to get the good stuff. Now, I still fell into a depraved addiction. I still hoarded as much valuable metal as I could get my hands on. I revelled in my degeneracy. I stayed awake until 6 AM mining iron from bloody sewer dungeons, mate. So, all in all, it was a pretty good time, and I'll forgive Valheim for the trespasses here, but yeah, I would say it would be nice to have the option to tone the grind down just a little bit. The final mechanic I should mention is base building. How's the base building in Valheim? Well, I'm happy to say it's actually very cool. It's not like Minecraft where you can just throw blocks around willy-nilly, create this or that without any kind of skill or thought whatsoever. No, you actually have to put some thought into your constructions and build them in a way that makes some kind of sense. Maybe you have to put some pillars down and some roof thatching, I don't know if that's a word, but you know, you've got to actually think about stuff. Like, my group even had a dedicated builder, because sometimes it's just better to, you know, offload all that construction work onto one person, I think, while everyone can roam and kill some mobs and whatnot. So, yeah, I actually really liked the base building in this game. You can also create some really nice looking stuff. You know, you can do castles, you can do moats, you can do big walls with spikes and stuff. It's very cool. Yeah, there's one complaint I have here, and that is, for some unknown, just very bizarre reason, you have to have a building surrounding your crafting table before you're able to build a ton of stuff. I don't know who came up with this idea. Apparently builders just really need to not be exposed to the elements or something when they're working. I don't bloody know what's going on with that. Very frustrating. You end up not being able to craft unless you build this little perfect building at the very start. I guess it's maybe to incentivize you to build buildings early on in the game. I don't know. I don't know why they did that. It's a bit frustrating and janky. Maybe they'll change it, fix it, whatever. Not that big of an issue, but probably worth mentioning. I think everyone struggles with this problem who plays this game. Anyway, with that being said, there are some very nice mechanics. We've got to give props to Valheim for the beekeeping possibilities. You can keep bees, you can create beehives, you can get honey from them, you can use that honey to make soups, decoctions. It's incredible. I feel like generally these days we're a little bit disconnected from nature. So yeah, I'm very thankful to Valheim for allowing me to reconnect through the use of, you know, farming the lands, looking at my farmland and reaping all my carrots and my turnips and my bees, and it was just great. It was just a great experience having a nice settlement constructed and some wonderful fertile land. And now we get to the most important part of any game, of course. How good does it actually look? No, I joke around, but the Valheim devs have actually created something truly remarkable when it comes to the atmosphere and the visual appeal of this game. Despite having some kind of simplistic textures and almost like a retro feeling art style, I don't really know how to describe it. But the lighting, combined with some small details, you know, like birds fluttering and squirrels on trees and stuff like this, incredible physics and atmospheric sounds, it just creates such a wondrous world to explore. I don't really know how to describe it. I mean, you've been watching the gameplay, so hopefully it comes across, but I will let some of the gameplay speak for itself. Feel comforted by the gentle tones, you know, present in the small villages and grassy hills. Then there's the more, you know, reserved forest, the black forest, a little bit spookier. Then you've got the swamp land, which is even more terrifying and crazy. And honestly, guys, this game even feels more like Skyrim than Skyrim does. Cue the Skyrim montage. Now, while Skyrim music plays blissfully into our ears, I would like to quickly mention that the sound design is amazing in this game. All of the sound effects for mining, for chopping wood, for combat, everything just sounds so great. Makes those activities a lot more pleasant to be engaged in. Also, I forgot to mention that the physics in this game are incredible. You've got trees falling, killing other players, killing yourself with trees that can fall on you. They can knock down other trees, just through the momentum of the tree falling. You've got flooding if you build too close to the coast, like the water can come into your house and crazy stuff, like fire can be put out by water coming from a certain direction. The physics are so cool in this game. I don't know how they did it, but it really adds to that feeling of permanence in the world and like reality of it. I don't know, really, really helpful for immersion. Makes you feel like you're living in a lived world. And yeah, the music's lovely. It's very calming, peaceful. We're listening to Skyrim music now, but the peaceful music of Valheim is not much worse. I will say that much. All in all, guys, this game is just bloody impressive. Just really bloody impressive. I'm amazed at what this team has done. I have got some brutal, some honest problems with it, which I've shared, and I think they're fair. Let me know if you agree or disagree, of course. But overall, I would strongly recommend this game to anyone. Just so you know, my PC isn't the best. The specs are in the description, but I had no problems with this game at all in terms of running it. I would recommend, if you do want to try Valheim yourself, that you find a group of friends to play with, because I think that's the best way to play it. Doing it on your own will only exacerbate some of the problems that it has, I think, in terms of grindiness and bosses being tough to take down. But yeah, overall, I've had a great time with this game. Had a great time being a Viking. Yeah, $20 is a steal for this. Good luck, have fun. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. Enjoy, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.